Wow, what a couple of intense weeks we've all had, right? And we're still in it. And we'll still be in it through the rest of the summer in varying degrees of intensity. So buckle up. Welcome back. And if you're new to my channel, my name is Suzanne. It's nice to meet you. My goal for this channel is to ground us by offering some broader context to the evolutionary cycles we're all experiencing, and to offer some practical advice about how we can channel these energies more productively in our own lives. So this episode, I'm going to do a quick recap of the recent Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune opening squares, a preview of the summer solstice chart kicking off tomorrow on June 20th, and finally the upcoming new moon in Cancer happening on June the 25th. I love to deep dive into these cycles. So if you're interested in nerding out on astrological charts, you've come to the right place. So let's begin. Well, the opening square of Mars and Uranus leading up to the final opening square of Jupiter and Saturn held a lot more violent surprises than I had anticipated, with the political assassinations that happened in Minnesota on the 13th and Israel attacking Iran on the 14th. But I just want to remind everyone that even though these specific escalations were surprising, they were simply developmental tensions that were seeded during the conjunction in 2020, the first time Trump was president. While there was some isolated events of violence at the No King's Day protests, these protests were mainly peaceful, and the military parade was a non-event comparatively. The president was upstaged again. But this only goes to show that violence and war is nothing to celebrate. A few days after the final opening square of Jupiter and Saturn, the first opening square of Jupiter and Neptune perfected on the 18th. I briefly mentioned this square in my last video, highlighting the chart of OpenAI and their big ChatGPT announcement, which happened during the opening sextile. As the 12th house sextile demonstrates, the announcement was a bit overhyped, leading people to believe that the technology was way more advanced than it ended up being. OpenAI's board revolted after this announcement, and they fired the CEO Sam Altman over trust issues. But the hype he generated ended up winning out. In turn, most of the board was fired or quit. A whistleblower ended up committing suicide, and Sam Altman was eventually rehired. He's the rainmaker after all, and the rainmaker tends to win out more often than not. He's here to sell you the dream, and you are here to buy into that dream. The fake it till you make it strategy worked in generating a ton of investment as VCs clamored to go all in on the next big tech revolution. And like clockwork, on June the 16th, it was reported that OpenAI won a $200 million defense contract. So now the hype will be tested in the high-stakes game of war, symbolized by Aries, where real lives are at stake. Will we go head-to-head in a real world war scenario with China's DeepSeek? Will we all be guinea pigs in a real AI war scenario at the opposition in 2028? Alternatively, I was listening to Tristan Harris talk about the downfalls of both closed AI systems versus open AI systems. He describes in a video I'll link below how we've all sort of fallen into this trance of passively surrendering, Jupiter and Neptune conjunct in Pisces, to the inevitability of AI, despite our disillusionment with the abuses already present. And he proposes a hopeful alternative. He suggests we can create self-agency by collaborating with others, taking collective responsibility for our future, even if we can't personally solve this problem ourselves. Jupiter in Cancer, Neptune in Aries. What a great illustration of how the tensions of squares operate in real life. Squares can be constructive if we open ourselves to the work that must be done to overcome the tensions that are brought into the light during these times of struggle. And in the US, many people who voted for this president's America First platform are becoming similarly disillusioned by the reality that's unfolding before them. Is there an opportunity here to bridge the frustrations of the real issue at hand here, which is the tension between the haves and the have-nots? Yes, there are differences in values that we cannot deny, but mostly we have been manipulated into these very old, tired tactics that try to pit one against the other. So if we can find common ground, we can more efficiently tackle this real issue and not be at war with each other like the powers that be want us to be, in real war with each other or real war in the outside world against tribes. Now let's look at the summer solstice chart that happens on Friday, June 20th, placed in Washington, D.C. In the days leading up to the summer solstice, ancient Romans celebrated Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, home, and family. An unborn calf removed from its mother's womb was customarily sacrificed. Women especially poured into the sacred temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum, carrying small tokens for their immortal goddess, who was so powerful she could grant fertility. I thought it interesting that Vesta at 5 degrees Scorpio in the 9th house is squaring the ascendant-descendant of this chart. The Sabian symbol, the gold rush, tears men away from their native soil. Pluto on the ascendant, squaring the moon at 0 degrees Taurus, just past a conjunction with Chiron, is also the apex of a yod, with Mars in the 7th house and a Sun-Jupiter conjunction in the 5th. Demonstrating the powerful forces of the United States bunker bomb hanging over the Israel-Iran conflict and the tension of the people in the U.S. who do not want to intervene. We are all dealing with much larger forces at work that we are all having to adjust to during this time. But the question we must ask ourselves is one based on our deepest held values. How can we get beyond our complacency of fear and start taking part in a revolution we are watching unfold right in front of our very eyes? How do we gather the agency that Tristan spoke about? How do we keep from repeating the same cycles despite history that informs us that we have now simply switched the sides of the wheel? The sides of the aggressor versus the oppressed. The Saturn Neptune conjunction squares the sun in this chart, meaning that we need to bring our vision of the future down to earth. We have the opportunity to make a more spiritual, informed connection to the beyond during this time. Can we spread that good news instead of the fear-mongering that is happening all around us? So now let's talk about the new moon in Cancer happening on June the 25th. Raven Caldera calls this new moon the mother's daughter moon, and she has this to say about this new moon. On the mother's daughter moon, we examine our relationships with others, especially those in which one person nurtures another. We also examine our early nurturing and our same-sex bonds. If you don't have any, that's certainly something to examine. We may also examine the issues of differentiating oneself from the same-sex parent, which usually happens in adolescence, but sometimes waits until well into adulthood. This is a good time for those who need a rite of passage to plan or carry that out. Those born under the mother's daughter moon are deeply affected emotionally by the people they are close to, and they often have trouble discerning the emotional boundaries between themselves and those that they love. This is not the Pisces problem of having trouble defending boundaries against anyone, including store clerks and gas station attendants. Me. Cancerians are quite able to slam their shell against people who are not family or beloved. Generally, they will defer for a long time, submerging resentment until they blow up, which, considering Cancerian levels of emotion and considering that there is a good chance that they will be a double Cancer, will be significant. The new moon Sabian symbol: at a railroad crossing, an automobile is wrecked by a train, is about respecting karma. The moon is out of bounds, and this chart is heavy on the water and cardinality. So it's a very emotional but action-oriented new moon. In human design, the new moon falls on the cross of service, and it's about evolving under pressure. It is sometimes only through this type of pressure that we can see clearly what needs to change. The new moon, forming right after the start of a new synodic cycle with Jupiter, sits in the 12th house of this chart and is moving past the inconjunct with Pluto, now on the cusp of the 8th house. So there's some behind the scenes maneuvering based on this current crisis that we're all experiencing. Mars in Virgo is in the 3rd house. It's in a closing sextile relationship with the new moon. And interestingly, the opening Mars moon sextile was on June the 6th, the day that Musk started his feud with Trump. And this new moon happens right before Musk's birthday. So I'm expecting we'll hear more from him. And Mars just happens to be near his own natal moon in Virgo, which is in his 2nd house. So it has something to do with money issues that he's experiencing during this time. There's an ending to whatever was brought up during his feud with Trump. There's a dissolving of that issue. Mars in Virgo is practical, and it's about doing whatever it takes to identify the issue at hand and to take action to remedy it. But it can also be hypercritical and relentless in its criticism. Mars is ruled by Mercury, which sits in the 1st house in this chart. And Mercury at this degree is about weighing options, weighing out the pros and the cons before we move forward practically. In our own lives, we do have the opportunity, once we weigh these options, to take practical next steps in spite of or because of the crisis that has developed around us. I thought it very interesting that the midheaven of this chart is on a degree that has been repeated again and again in various charts and through different planets as we've moved through this year. You might remember this Sabian symbol. It's called "A religious organization succeeds in overcoming the corrupting influence of perverted practices and materialized ideals." As I looked through the movement of the planets through this degree, I'm seeing that it speaks to key events in the ongoing conflicts and negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, Iran, and the US and China. Sabian is written moralistically as if one side is the righteous one and the other side is the unrighteous. But instead, I think it just symbolizes the ideology present in these negotiations, in these wars, in the ways that we present one side as being the unrighteous and the other being the righteous. Yes, beliefs and ideologies are all present, but it's about who gets access to the resources and power. That's the fundamental issue. There's a certain rebalancing going on as we reach the end of many cycles to start new ones. It's a fundamental law of the wheel. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. People who lead religious wars always have God on their side, no matter which side you fall on. If one side has God on their side and the other does too, what does that tell you? The winner is the one that God champions? Well, you can find that each religion has had its own winning streak at different times in history. I think it's more to do with what happens when you do have the power and how you shift and change over times to become the oppressor and then to lose your power as a result. If you want to look at this more simply, it's very similar to the cycle of innovation. There comes a certain point when there is nothing more to be sucked out of a cycle. The snake has thoroughly feasted and is looking for what else it can feast on. Remember, this is a transition year. It's not the new cycle, it's the old cycle at the end eating its own tail. This past month, we've gotten a taste of what's to come with this new Neptune and Saturn cycle as it's inched closer and closer to a conjunction until Neptune retrogrades on July the 4th. You see in this chart, the conjunction is at the very top. So we're seeing it in the United States very clearly playing out on our national stage. The North Node points to a code of ethics or a law from on high. This law is currently being blown up to be reset for the new cycle upcoming. So what are you reconfiguring or resetting in your own life? What values do you have? Who is your tribe? Is it changing? Do you feel pressure to dissolve old structures to make room for new structures? Are you holding on to the old because you're afraid of change? I'd love to hear more from you. Where is Aries in your chart? And are you getting clues to this new cycle that's happening in your own life? Drop a comment below or send me an email. You can send me an email by going to gohigherfrequency.com. I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, I'm wishing you the best as we all feel the stress of this month. I hope and pray that we all get through this and we get through this together. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time. Bye.